want you to put yourself in a very specific chair for a moment. Just imagine you are sitting right at the head of the boardroom table.
Right.
You're the CEO or, perhaps the chief risk officer of a massive Fortune 500 enterprise. You have virtually endless capital.
Armies of elite analysts.
Exactly. You have so much raw data flowing into your servers that you're measuring it in zettabytes. And yet somehow, a single, highly localized disruption, I mean like a block shipping lane or a sudden regulatory shift.
Or just a regional weather anomaly.
Yeah, exactly. It still manages to catch your entire organization completely off guard, and it just shaves billions off your market cap in a single afternoon.
It is, I think it's really the defining paradox of modern leadership. You have this absolute granular visibility into your company's past, but it's combined with near total blindness regarding your company's future.
Which is exactly what we are tearing into today. We've brought a massive stack of sources to the table for this deep dive. We've got industry white papers on enterprise risk, a huge body of research on the failures of legacy governance software, and a really fascinating software case study.
Yeah, that case study is incredibly detailed.
It really is. So our mission today is to diagnose the fatal flaw in how modern C-suites handle emerging risks. We're going to break down the critical difference between having mere information, and possessing actual intelligence.
Right.
And to pull this out of the theoretical, we're evaluating a brand new category of technology called Executive Predictive Risk Intelligence, or EPII.
Or PRA.
Specifically through the lens of a platform called Sophurion Horizon.
The place we really have to start is, well, the failure of the current model. I mean, before we evaluate a new technology category, we have to look at the mechanics of why these incredibly expensive, sophisticated risk management architectures are systematically failing executive teams.
Let's talk about the sheer volume of the problem first, because the research in our stack points out this staggering metric. Like 90% of all the data in human history was created in the last 2 years alone.
90%. It's wild.
90%. But if you go talk to your peers in the C-suite, nobody feels more confident.
No, not at all.
In fact, they feel significantly more exposed. They feel less certain about their operational continuity than they did like a decade ago.
Right, and we call that the global intelligence gap. Because the fundamental issue isn't a lack of data, it's a structural flaw in how that data is housed.
Housed, meaning the silos.
Exactly. In a modern enterprise, information is physically and culturally trapped in silos. The risk management team sits in one ecosystem, looking at historical loss data. Then the finance team is in a totally different system running Monte Carlo simulations on capital liquidity.
And compliance is over there tracking regulatory updates on their own separate dashboard.
Right. And cybersecurity is hunting digital threats in a completely separate bunker. They are all highly competent teams, but their databases literally cannot communicate with each other.
I can feel the dashboard fatigue just putting myself in that CEO mindset. I mean, I'm getting 50 different 100-page reports from 50 different departments.
And none of it connects.
No. It's like trying to fly a commercial jet. But instead of a live instrument panel, your crew just keeps handing you the maintenance logs from last week's flight.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. Like, I have all the past performance metrics. I have all the information. But I have absolutely zero forward-looking intelligence to actually make a strategic pivot today.
The aviation analogy is actually the perfect way to separate those two concepts. Information, which, encompasses your structured data, your KPI dashboards, your quarterly earnings reports, that's essentially a rearview mirror.
It just tells you what already happened.
It's exactly, down to the penny. But intelligence is a forward-facing radar. It synthesizes current variables to tell you what is happening at this very millisecond, what the probabilistic outcomes are for tomorrow, and critically, what mechanical levers you need to pull right now to alter that outcome.
But wait, organizations currently spend billions on business intelligence or BI tools, right?
Huh.
Isn't the entire pitch of a BI platform that it solves this exact visibility problem?
Well, BI tools solve a different equation. They aggregate historical SQL data. They are phenomenal at telling you that, say, your profit margins in the European market dipped by 2% last quarter because of increased freight costs.
Okay.
But they do not cross-reference external, unstructured, forward-looking indicators. Executives don't need another software license to help them understand yesterday's freight costs.
Right, they already paid for that.
They need a system that warns them that freight costs are going to triple next month.
Which brings us to the core of why these isolated silos are suddenly an existential threat. 10 years ago, You could analyze your supply chain in a vacuum and be relatively fine.
Yeah, you could get away with it.
But the industry research we are looking at argues that we've crossed a threshold into what they call the age of convergence.
The age of convergence. Because the fundamental mechanics of global risk have mutated. We are no longer dealing with localized, isolated disruptions. We operate within a deeply interconnected global system, and risks have become cascading.
Cascading, meaning one thing directly triggers another.
Exactly. Climate volatility, geopolitical realignment, cyber vulnerabilities, regulatory mandates, and supply chain constraints. They are no longer separate risk categories. They trigger one another in real time.
Let's actually trace the mechanism of that, because the source material provides a brilliant breakdown of how this cascades. So let's say you have a severe prolonged drought in a specific agricultural region.
Okay, so that single climate event restricts water usage.
Right, which drops agricultural production.
Fair. And that drop in yield disrupts the global food supply chain, causing an immediate spike in global food prices.
Which feeds directly into macroeconomic inflation.
Right. So to cool the inflation, central banks hike interest rates, which fundamentally alters global insurance markets and your company's cost of capital.
Meanwhile, back at the site of the drought, the localized lack of food and water triggers mass migration.
And that migration destabilizes the region geopolitically, leading to sudden regulatory responses, tariffs, or even border closures from neighboring governments.
And this is where we have to pause and look at these factors with absolute impartiality.
Yes, very important.
When we map climate events or geopolitical shifts in a boardroom context, we are stripping away politics completely. We're treating them strictly as quantitative business variables.
Right. A drought or a tariff is just a data point. It exerts a measurable mathematical force on an organization's operational continuity.
It's just the reality of the board you're playing on. You have to manage the reality. The old way of managing risk was like analyzing a single localized issue, say, a power outage in one building.
Right, isolated.
But the modern age of convergence is like a massive interconnected power grid. A transformer blows in one city, and because the load shifts instantaneously, 3 surrounding states go dark in a matter of milliseconds.
And if your chief risk officer is only monitoring the local transformer, they're going to miss the blackout until the lights go out in your headquarters.
Exactly.
That blind spot is where legacy software fails. Your CRO cannot protect the enterprise if your cybersecurity monitors aren't feeding data into your climate models.
And your climate models aren't mathematically linked to your geopolitical threat feeds.
Right. A cyber event might take down a critical logistics hub, which triggers a supply chain failure, which causes you to miss a delivery target, which ultimately breaches a compliance regulation.
And if your systems are walled off, you don't see the chain reaction until the regulatory fines hit your desk. So if the grid is this fragile and our internal data is this disconnected, how does an executive actually fix the architecture without ripping out billions of dollars in legacy software?
Well, that's where we turn to the proposed solution in our stack, the emergence of the Executive Predictive Risk Intelligence category.
EPRI.
EPRI, exactly. And specifically, Sophurion Horizon. Let's establish the boundaries of what Sophurion Horizon is doing by starting with what it isn't.
Good idea.
It is not an enterprise resource planning tool. It is not attempting to replace SAP or Oracle.
Right.
It is also not a standard GRC, a governance, risk, and compliance tool that just, logs your audits. And most importantly, it is not an automated decision maker designed to replace human executive judgment.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because the moment I hear predictive intelligence or AI modeling, my skepticism just goes through the roof.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, is this just an incredibly expensive, enterprise-grade chatbot hallucinating doomsday scenarios? Because no CEO is going to pivot a global manufacturing strategy based on a black box algorithm guessing about the future.
And the creators of the platform address that skepticism head-on. They do it by shifting the goalposts from prediction to preparedness.
Okay, how so?
Horizon functions similarly to a modern meteorological forecasting model. A hurricane model doesn't claim to know the exact millimeter where a raindrop will fall.
Right.
Instead, it measures barometric pressure, wind shear, and ocean temperatures across thousands of sensors and calculates a high probability cone. It tells you to board up your windows and secure your supply lines before the storm makes landfall.
I see. So it's identifying the environmental conditions that make a disruption highly probable, rather than acting like a crystal ball.
Mechanically, it acts as a synthesis layer. It uses API hooks to sit on top of your existing systems.
So it just plugs right in.
Yeah, it pulls in your specific organizational footprint, your SKU data, your Tier 1 and Tier 2 supplier locations, your capital reserves, and then uses semantic data mapping to cross-reference your internal reality with massive, unstructured external intelligence domains.
It's looking for correlations that a human team could never process fast enough.
Exactly. It distills that massive ocean of variables down to answer three very specific questions for the C-suite. What is happening right now? Why does it mathematically matter to our specific revenue streams? And what mechanical actions should we take today to mitigate it?
To really understand the mechanics of how it answers those questions, we have to tear into the actual case study from the sources. We have a sanitized executive intelligence report generated by Sophurion Horizon for a large-scale technology organization.
Yeah, let's walk through those numbers.
If you are sitting in the C-suite looking at this report, the first thing you notice is what isn't there. It doesn't dump 1,000 raw data points on your desk.
Right, no dashboard fatigue.
Exactly. It synthesizes everything into a top-line overall intelligence score. For this specific tech company, they scored a 30 out of 100, which the system mathematically categorizes as contained.
And a score of 30 just means their baseline operational posture is relatively stable, given current market conditions.
But the real value is the next metric, right? The emerging risk index.
Yes. For this company, it sits at a 34 out of 100. This is the forward-looking radar. It's alerting the executive team that while the present moment is contained, the external variables are shifting, and the probability of future disruption is accelerating.
And it anchors that probability to a hard financial metric. The report calculates an estimated annual financial exposure of $595 million.
Which is huge.
Right. Now, if I'm the CEO, a nearly $600 million value at risk gets my immediate attention. But how does it actually calculate that number? It can't just be pulling it out of thin air.
It derives that number by mapping the external risk directly to internal revenue dependencies. It identifies the risk concentration. The platform flagged climate as this tech company's leading exposure, scoring a 43 out of 100. That was immediately followed by supply chain at a 35 out of 100.
Wait, that's the exact cascading convergence we talked about earlier? Climate leading directly into supply chain?
Yes, the platform is mapping the nonlinear correlation. It's identifying that accelerating climate disclosure regimes and regional weather volatility are fundamentally weakening the company's Tier 2 and Tier 3 supplier fragility.
Wow.
The $595 million isn't a guess. It's the calculated revenue loss if those specific fragile nodes fail and halt production on the company's highest margin hardware lines.
But the platform doesn't just scan for threats, which I found fascinating. It's also programmed to scan for latent opportunities. Because, risk and opportunity are just different sides of the volatility coin.
The algorithm is impartial. It just looks for anomalies. In this case, the system analyzed their operational data and generated a score of 63 out of 100 on their sustainability posture.
Which is pretty high.
It recognized that their environmental and emissions data was actually significantly stronger than their industry peers.
And it explicitly connects that to the finance department.
Yeah.
It tells the CFO, hey, your environmental metrics are strong enough right now to qualify for sustainability-linked loans or green bonds.
Right.
It identified a mechanism to refinance their corporate debt at a lower interest rate. I mean, that's a massive commercial advantage they had no idea they possessed, just because the sustainability team's data had never been cross-referenced with the Treasury Department's capital strategy.
That right there is the chasm between information and intelligence. Information is a dashboard telling the sustainability officer that carbon output is down 4%.
But intelligence is the system telling the CFO to leverage that 4% drop to shave millions off their debt servicing costs.
Exactly.
Okay, I have to stop us here, because I'm looking at the top-line metrics of this case study again, and there is a massive red flag.
Uh-oh. What is it?
Overall score 30, emerging risk 34. But then there is the confidence rating. The system gave its own report a confidence rating of only 15 out of 100.
A 15% confidence score.
I mean, if my chief risk officer walks into a boardroom strategy session and hands me a report with a 15% confidence metric, I'm throwing it in the trash. And honestly, I might fire them.
That's a natural reaction.
Why would any executive base a strategic pivot on an intelligence platform that mathematically admits it is 85% unsure of its own analysis?
It's an entirely fair reaction, but it requires a fundamental rewiring of how executives perceive intelligence data.
Okay, walk me through it.
In legacy systems, a low confidence score is viewed as a software failure. But in an EPRI framework, a low confidence score is the intelligence.
You're going to have to explain the math on that.
It's a Bayesian probability issue. Traditional software often hallucinates confidence. It looks at the limited data it possesses and pretends it has the whole picture, which leads executives to make highly confident, entirely wrong decisions.
Right, because it doesn't know what it doesn't know.
Exactly. Horizon operates differently. It maps the total universe of variables required to make a 100% accurate forecast. Then, it looks at the data your company has actually allowed it to access.
Oh, I see.
The 15% score is the system explicitly telling the chief risk officer, I can only see 15% of your operational grid, the other 85% is completely dark to me. It is mathematically quantifying your exact blind spots.
It's identifying the gaps in the silo.
And it goes further than just identifying them. It provides the mechanical solution. The report doesn't just shrug at the 15% confidence.
Right.
It explicitly recommends that the organization needs to integrate the APIs for their CRM, like their Salesforce data, and their ERP, their SAP, or Oracle supply chain data directly into the intelligence layer.
That makes absolute sense.
Yeah.
The system is basically saying, look, based on global weather patterns and geopolitical news, I see a threat. But because you haven't plugged in your customer pipeline or your real-time inventory, I can't tell you exactly how bad the impact will be. My confidence is low until you give me the rest of your internal data.
Yes. And once it maps those blind spots, it hands the executive team a highly specific, sequenced playbook to lock down the exposure.
It breaks it down into actionable C-suite mandates.
Right. In the 0 to 6 month window, it advises the CEO and board to convene a targeted review on climate-driven supply chain exposure. It mandates the COO to initiate site-level continuity drills.
And it directs the chief procurement officer to immediately pre-stage alternative sourcing for their most critical Tier 1 dependencies.
It takes the abstract, paralyzing fear of global convergence and distills it into a Tuesday morning checklist.
That's brilliant. And it extends further out, too. For the 6 to 18-month window, it's directing the CIO to harden critical digital infrastructure and pushing the strategy team to run 2030 climate disruption scenarios against their long-term capital planning.
The mechanism at work here is the transition from reactive damage control to anticipatory strategy.
Anticipatory strategy.
Organizations using this caliber of intelligence stop managing crises after they happen and start managing the baseline conditions that create the crises in the first place.
Which brings us back to you, the listener. Think about the legacy software your own team logs into every day. We've charted a significant evolution today in this deep dive.
We really have.
We started by diagnosing the fatal flaw of the modern enterprise. The reality that drowning in historical data has actually widened the global intelligence gap.
And we examine the mechanics of the age of convergence, mapping how risks are no longer isolated events, but cascading, nonlinear chain reactions across climate, geopolitics, and global supply chains.
Right. And then we evaluated the executive predictive risk intelligence category.
Yeah.
We looked at how platforms like Sophurion Horizon don't replace the human executives in the boardroom, but rather act as a vital synthesis layer.
They connect internal structured data with external volatility to map blind spots and calculate actual financial exposure.
The baseline reality of the modern economy is that competitive advantage is no longer purely about operational efficiency or rapid product iteration.
No, in an era defined by constant, compounding disruption, your ultimate competitive advantage is your structural resilience. It is the architectural ability to process vast complexity, identify converging threats, and execute strategic pivots faster and more accurately than your market rivals.
Which leaves us with a final thought to mull over, and it's one with massive implications for anyone sitting in a leadership chair right now.
Okay, what is it?
If EPRI platforms become the gold standard for navigating global volatility, it fundamentally changes the nature of fiduciary duty.
Ah, that's an interesting point.
If an intelligence layer mathematically warns you of a 60% probability that your primary supply chain will collapse in 3 months, and you ignore the system's recommendations to save on short-term costs, are you now legally negligent?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. If the data was there, synthesized, and handed to you, who takes the blame when the system was right and your company loses $500 million?
Yeah.
Tomorrow morning, when you open your laptop and look at your KPI dashboards, ask yourself, is this screen just telling me what already happened? Or is it legally protecting me by preparing me for what happens next?
Because if you are only navigating by the rearview mirror, you are entirely responsible for what you hit in the dark.
And on a grid that is already sparking, you need the radar turned all the way up.